It should be recording now.
Good.
And welcome, Ivan, to the Talk to Work podcast, or Talk to Work community, I should say. I'm not sure if it's a podcast or what is it in particular. But before we get started, maybe give you and I know each other from a little bit of time, but the rest of our audience doesn't. So give me a quick quick background so we can frame, people understand who we're talking to and what we're going to gain out of this.
Sure. So I'm Ivan Kayser. I'm the CEO of Redscout, which is a brand strategy consultancy. I've been with Redscout for about 10 years now. And our work tends to span brand strategy and business transformation, often working with usually sort of one or like in three broad buckets, lots of legacy businesses trying to adapt to changing consumer behavior. So the Best Buys, Hiltons, those sort of large legacy businesses we know. Very scaled technology companies that are building brand for the first time. So we work with Uber, Peloton, those big players, defining their brand for the first time. And then increasingly, and maybe it's relevant to like the sort of the introduction of technology into everything that we do. We're working with a lot of B2B or very tech-driven industry companies that are transforming industries through technology. So folks like Stride with access to benefits, or Nomad with travel, employment markets for healthcare professionals, Atticus for access to social security benefits. There's a lot of companies that are, again, like transforming. And across all of these, you need the sort of fundamentals of brand strategy. Who are you? What is the problem that you're solving? What is your unique point of differentiation? How do you express that at scale through and deploy it through a marketing mix? So that tends to be the work that we do. Very upstream. We do some execution, but not a lot. So we have probably a good vantage point for the kind of questions that the business leaders are asking themselves in these moments of change.
Great, thanks, you, Ivan. Just for completeness, how big is Redscout today? How many colleagues do you have roughly?
About 40, and we're part of a holding company called Stagwell, which is a couple thousand people. So we collaborate with other agencies there.
And Redscout is based in New York City, right? In Manhattan.
Our home is in New York, but we are remote first. So the team is about half in the tri-state area and half spread around the country.
Great. When let's talk AI now. Let's talk
Sure.
And as I mentioned before, we're looking to help small business leaders and owners across typically professional services or services companies understand what you can do today with it and be very pragmatic with it. So top of mind question, when you hear AI today, what's the first tool or use case that comes to mind?
Well, that's an interesting question. I think that the answer's changed quite a bit for me in the last year. When the balance of understanding or was very much in favor of a small group of people who had figured out sort of core capabilities, and the rest of us who were just at the surface. There was an incredible development of usage-specific applications, and every industry got them. We got ours that emerged. They were around research. They were around idea generation. They were around mock-ups. And what I realized over time is that they were all a very, very thin layer of UI tapping into engines and effectively doing prompt engineering. And I realized that there were sort of three problems with these solutions, and they were true of across everything. One, because they still were trying to sell SaaS, they oriented themselves towards like an average use case. And the problem is in no industry do people have average use cases. They have many use cases which have an average, but no one's actually ever experienced the average experience. And then number two, they used all, because they were all trying to get to scale, they used generic data. And then number three, the obvious problem is that the platforms, underlying platforms, were evolving faster than they could keep up.
Right.
So with a lot of these tools, like particularly when the reasoning models came out, it became very, very clear that you could get a better research output directly into a reasoning engine, OpenAI's or whoever, or Claude, than you could from the custom solutions that were promising you that that's what they did. That's the first sort of like domino to fall. And so a year ago, I was very into some of the core research platforms. There's like a few that are specific to agencies. What we've been using much more now is custom agents or custom GPTs. Not because we're particularly sort of amazing at them, but because I have found that using custom data sets instead of generic ones, custom templates in your prompts instead of generic ones, has such a powerful effect on outcomes. And I'm very interested to see like what, are there apps that catch up, that realize that it turns out that selling AI solutions like SaaS was a very bad idea, but actually there's a new flavor of software that could come out that actually is AI native, in the sense of saying like, hey, actually AI is good as very different things than SaaS. The imperatives are, when you build SaaS, you have to create generic journeys. You have to have a logic that the user has to adapt to. AI doesn't require you to do that. Don't do it. And how do you build solutions that are very different? So today, right now, mostly the principal use case, most of the time that I spend with AI solutions is building custom GPTs that reflect our workflows, our specific projects, etc.
So this is awesome. I think it's very insightful to think about one of the core values of AI is to allow you to not be generic, right? To be very specific and specific to the individual or to the business case, the use case. So that makes perfect sense. But before I start drilling you on how you build those GPTs and what technologies, tell me, step back. You just stepped back for over the last year and how it changed. But on looking at what you know today, and of course we know of the axiom of the more you know, the less you know. But on a scale of 1 to 10, how confident are you to really understand where AI can create value for your business? How would you rate yourself, confidence level?
Very low in terms of knowing what AI can do. Very high in the fact that professional services businesses are at their best when they work on their model, when they're changing. And so at this point, I'm old enough that I experienced the digital wave, the social wave. Thank God we didn't get too involved in Web3.
The blockchain wave.
Yes, exactly. But like I even remember like small things like Bluetooth low energy, which like BLE, which was like a thing that we thought the internet would get really local. And some of them were really disruptive and some of them were not. All of them made like the agencies or the professionals generally who sort of question their own models and the way we work, and on like first principle stuff. Like, what do clients really need right now? What is hard? How do I create unmitigated value? How do I get much more efficient on the things that deliver very little value? Those are the healthier businesses. To give you an example, maybe that's useful.
Yeah.
Trajectory is in consulting, research was a huge component. It was extremely valuable for all these firms. There were many firms that were doing 80% research, 20% strategy, and even strategy firms, management consultants or firms like ours, were doing 30% of their revenue maybe on research, which was commoditized, inefficient, often performative. You did the research in order to justify the reasoning, but you could have reason justifying anything. And so firms that like accepted that as a commercial opportunity, when the transformation of AI happened, ran into a very real liability, which was clients didn't want to pay for that anymore. You could get a pretty good derivative of public opinion by just asking the question of a model. And so, but if you think of it the other way around, which is at any given time when you run a business, you should think about where you create a lot of value and how you do more of it, where you create very little value for the amount of time you spend, and how do you make it more efficient. What do your clients really need that you can actually, so that they get most value out of your recommendation, then you're good. And so I think of the AI disruption as exactly just another one of these, a great time to ask yourself these first principles questions and like see what else we can build. And we're probably doing it wrong, but I don't mind. I care much more about us asking those questions to ourselves.
Now, tell us, and obviously it's just between the two of us, really, what came first? Did you start seeing customers telling you they would not want to pay for that research piece of the proposal, and that forced you to think through, the implication? Or did you really come to it from your own experience, looking at how you go in ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever, and you get pretty decent research pretty quickly that doesn't need, the junior people that you use to throw at the problems?
That's a good question. I think it was a little bit more complex, which is this is an odd disruption that is happening in the context of economic uncertainty. I think when you and I experience sort of digital expansion, at least the second wave, the social wave, like anybody who's actually experienced the first digital wave knows that it was the moment of rationalization that happened when the bubble burst. But social was a very different one, which was like all growth all the time. And so you could do a lot of dumb things and be okay. So this AI wave is happening in the context of economic pressure. There is no sector that is particularly figured out, right? Like there's no category of the economy that's just booming. Oh, it's not DTC and it's not legacy retail. And it turns out that it might not even be consumer electronics and Apple, and it's definitely not the big software players if the federal government has anything to do with it, or European regulators. So it's like, it's not very clear who's doing great. And
NVIDIA.
I'm sorry?
NVIDIA.
Sure. But I think that's a great opportunity, because it says, okay, well, we had a very clear imperative to challenge the way we work, to create efficiency. So it's not actually, it wasn't client driven, but it's not, that's not because we were so wise and visionary. It's because there was pressure anyway. To figure out what to do. And so that was really the driver for us embracing AI experimentation with quite a bit of enthusiasm, which was, no one thinks that we're going to work the same way today than we are in like 3 years, even if AI didn't happen. Even if AI didn't exist, we still transform.
You still have to transform. So, but let's go back to AI, and you mentioned research as a clear example where AI was displacing your existing workflow. So, what other, when you look at the day-to-day running of the agency that you've done for 10 years, and you look at the skills that you have and the processes that you follow, what are the other initial tasks that you can think AI could do a better job? When we think about AI as the automation layer of AI, for example, where do you feel things are still painfully manual? I don't know if it's in the finance area, invoicing, it's HR. I mean, what other place of your business do you feel like AI should allow you to be transformative?
Yeah. Okay. So I have three broadly that I think about. So one is, you're right. Like, I think business operations is like going to get transformed, like whether it be through automation or truly through AI generation. I think there's a need for a new service stack, and I think any of us who would start small businesses tomorrow would really want to be able to leverage these tools to the maximum to create an infrastructure. Like I think we've all done the massive amounts of documentation. Now you need to reinvent all of that for this new context. So definitely, I think it enables you to run small businesses much better. We can get into the specifics of that if that's useful. That's pretty straightforward. I think the second one that we hear from clients, which is interestingly different from what we work on, is that they need it is where there is prioritization, like a real opportunity is around reporting, measurement, forecasting. So AI as a way to bring rigor to data, and or utility to data, not rigor to data, utility to data. I think there's, for a long time in organizations, there's been that, like, the measurement stack, the data stack has been this thing that nobody really understands, and that you get once in a while, you get a report. But AI is very good at taking a human question and telling and interpreting data in a way that is useful and to
in the context of the question.
Exactly, in a context-aware way. And so I think it's really that to me is like sort of use case number 2 that is driven by clients, which is like, how do you create a powerful AI layer around data so that for decision making? For us, within our core workflows, I would say the third bucket is strategy. I think strategy is going to become code, much more than framework. So, what managing consultants have done to the world is make people think that strategy is frameworks. Before that, strategy was leadership, and like it was personality. That we all can name a bunch of CEOs of the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. They were visionaries. Jobs to Welch to everybody. And then management consultant kicked in and said, no, actually strategy is 3-point plans and 2x2 boxes, etc. That's what real strategy is. And that was obviously, people were not scalable and replicable, and frameworks were always kind of dumb. And I think there's a very real opportunity to think about AI as an opportunity, as a strategy, as something that should be driven by code. So literally things like, when you define a brand, should you be defining it through a set of tonal words? We are confident, or should you train a tool to educate it about these words, pull in a bunch of really great copy that manifests it, let it interpret what is the true brand signature of this really great copy that manifests the brands, and then be able to generate copy or offer feedback on copy. That is strategy as code versus strategy as framework.
Now, that's interesting. So my gut reaction to that statement, which sounds really insightful, is that similar to what you said about SaaS, right? When you said SaaS is the average of the use case, and I think what I hear you is like, with the management consulting paradigm, strategy was the average of the template / framework / system that the consulting firm had put in place. And now you see a way higher level of complexity. But I see, when you say complexity or granularity, I see just this notion of everything is much more personalized and much more unique to each even given situation, brand, product, service, whatever it is. Is that the right way to think about it?
I think it's the SaaS paradigm or the management consulting paradigm, which interestingly both happened at the same time, had two fundamental premises. The user learns to use the tool, and the right path, and we seek an average, a simplification, like an average outcome. The tools serve an average outcome. The frameworks serve an average outcome. AI, and which is right, because we are terrible at communicating as humans complexity. We're very bad at communicating complexity.
And it helps, I think, similarly in terms of outcomes, right? We all know about the rule of 40 in SaaS and things like that, right? So we ended up being governed by outcome standard, right? You need a 40%, 40 rule of 40, blah, blah, blah. Else you don't have a good business, which is completely average-based mindset.
That's right. And
Yeah.
where on the opposite, AI is built to respond to an individual prompt, and AI has no problem with very large amount of data, keeping all of the relationship of all the complex and all of the actually prefers, right? Like if you train an AI engine on average use cases, it's terrible.
Right.
If you train an AI engine on a diversity of use cases, it's able to retain both the most likely use cases, which do correlate with average, but also the extremes and respond accordingly based on the prompt. So I think you're exactly right. SaaS management consultant, average use cases, user learns to use the tool. AI driven is full embrace of complexity. Tool adapts to the individual use case.
You
I
know,
think that that's a good frame for it.
if we ground what you're thinking in the reality of what you and your team are doing, day after day over the last, few weeks, months, and looking ahead the next few months since things change so fast in this AI world, are there any specific insights you can share in terms of how do you manifest this thinking? So the thinking is strategy has to change. So what are you doing specifically around this strategy as code, initiative? Are you hiring developers instead of, English majors, or I don't know what you used to hire before? I guess. Are there any specific actionable insight?
Yeah. So I think a huge one is maybe slightly counterintuitive, which is we realize how bad we were at documentation. The organizations in general aren't very good at documenting things because we've all operated from this like world of simplification. And we have a huge pivot that we've had to make is to say, okay, well, how do we actually build a corpus of learning for these tools? What do we think makes for a good idea and why? No agency ever talks about that, but like it's been a very long time since agencies had like really good articulations of we believe a good idea is X because of that, and here is 50 that meet this criteria. That, as a very practical matter, is a really big deal. You're so client oriented. It was like the good idea is whatever the client bought. Or similarly for insights and research. Oh, every you would adapt, you would do like, but then you'd have a really hard time training a tool. So the big change has been the need, like, and which is a change that is very much in progress and something that I'm like, that is very top of mind for me is, oh, you kind of got to work much more collaboratively with a bigger conversation around what are we trying to build and what are the ideas and what is the work in progress that you used to before. There's not a company that doesn't have huge amounts of data on like a Google Drive or a Dropbox that is useless and ill-structured and doesn't really make sense. And you're like, oh, that's actually the most important thing in an AI-driven operating model. Yeah. So no, weirdly, I don't think it's about hiring that much. I don't actually think that it's about changing the nature of the customer relationships. I think it's a lot about needing to have to really engage with the way you work, so you document what you do, so you work with more intent. Code requires that. Like if you think strategy as code or operating model as code requires you to have a real plan for what you're building at a macro level. And I don't think most businesses are able to say, this is what we are building at a macro level.
Do you feel the AI, generative AI capabilities are making it so crazily easy to generate, terabytes of content is counter to that need because you end up drowning yourself in documentation? How do you then make sure that the documentation is digestible, I guess, by the organization that you serve?
Well, it's what I was trying to say. It's just like, what are we trying to do here, right? Like, what is the premise? What do we think is actually valuable? You know, for us in strategy, it's sort of the core elements of what is valuable is the diagnosis. That's element one. Like, do we actually understand? Do we have a systematic way of diagnosing what an organization is going through, the stage that it's in? Then there are like insights, powerful ideas that reshape the way you think about your consumer. And then there is like high level strategy, like unlocks, things that are actually drive different kind of behavior. Those are probably about right as the three elements.
Yep.
You can generate a lot of content, but those are the things that you say, what is Redscout about? What is it like, if you think of it as a machine, as a piece of code,
as a system,
yeah, what does it do? Like, yeah, sure, okay, well, no, but at its core, what are the sort of elemental aspects? If you were to like literally design it as like a product requirements, as like if you were designing the company as software, you would say, okay, well, yeah, no, it's a piece of software that does three things in a really deliberate way. Can it do other things? Sure. Can it have secondary feature? Sure. Every time you get to a big strategic unlock, do we generate a bunch of implications or creative ideas? Sure. Do the creative ideas matter? No. We are not a piece of software that creates ideas. We're a piece of software that defines strategy built around these three things. But we're friendly. So once we've defined the strategy, we'll show you a bunch of ideas. But that's throwaway.
Bring them to life. Now, you're inspiring me to do something. I'm going to take the transcript of this conversation and feed it to Claude and try to get a, product requirements document to see if I can, create a system that would serve that process. Because I think you're right. This is a process, a system that you're feeding, right? Well, thank you for the tip.
Yeah. Well, so this is not mine. This is a friend of mine who said this to me, which is that the temptation is to like look at your process as it is and try to insert AI within your process. And if you do that, you're maintaining a lot of mistakes and inefficiency. And two, you're not really leveraging what AI can do. And his advice to me was to say, like, okay, actually, what are the things that are valuable? What are the things that you care about? They don't have to be valuable for the market. They might be valuable to you. What are the things that make you different? Okay, so how could AI actually help you
augment
that? Once you figure that out, you can solve the workflow stuff. You can solve the pricing stuff. You can stuff to your provocation, the staffing challenges that go around it. But don't think of SaaS as like, as like a universal solution. Think of it as a way to invent different kinds of solutions.
Just, I know we're gonna have to wrap up quickly. So you mentioned the team, and I always have a question around team and people. Are you concerned that some of the people on your team are themselves concerned about how AI is disrupting their potential lives, jobs, and income? And what step, if any, are you taking to build a AI positive culture if it's something that is part of your realm?
So yes, the answer is yes. It is a concern, and the way I think it manifests the most is, how do people who have not yet reached proficiency in their core discipline embrace change as they are themselves learning? And that's I think the part that's weirder about this change. It was very different from when social or digital happened. Like I was in my very early 20s when the digital transformation happened, and it was pretty easy. I saw it as a way to get to like peak expertise of something very, very fast. So by the time I was 26, 27, I ran the digital team for a very big agency in New York, which would never have happened on any other topic. But because, like, I was the one who knew the most about it, and so
you were the true digital native.
I was very lucky. I was like I was born just at the right time that I just caught it, but it didn't require I didn't have to like learn a set of skills and learn disruption at the same time, because it wasn't disrupting everything. It was just adding to something. And AI
It's
is
just
in that sense
normal. Yeah.
is harder for teams. And it's not because of digital, but it's how do we get people in the early stages of the careers to learn a set of fundamental skills as their industry is being disrupted. And that I have not figured out, but I do think it's a really interesting question.
It could be a confirmation bias. It probably is a confirmation bias on my part, but I've had from several conversations, I have the feeling that I see teenagers embracing AI very, very well. And I see people of my age and later actually being very curious about how AI can really transform and augment. I think maybe it's because we don't have the concern about our careers. Our careers are on the tail end. But I do hear a lot of the 30s and 40s that are the one where the first thing they tell you is, oh no, I can't use cursor or whatever because it hallucinates, right? And it's like, there's not even a curiosity. There's not even, how could I work around that? It's just, I get the flat, no, it's not ready. It's not good enough. It's just for kids and toys and whatnot, right? It's probably confirmation bias, but I am sense that it seems like maybe it's not so, maybe there's some truth to that.
Yeah. I think that in between group, in the context of a lot of disruption in general and uncertainty in general, this is like it's tricky. I think but as leaders, it raises really interesting questions about what kind of companies we should be building.
Yeah. One final quick question. Any AI tool that you tried recently that surprised you?
I mean, a little full circle, but I do think that like OpenAI's custom GPT tools are really good. They're getting very fun, and I have been much more interested in like I watch a lot of videos and like learn a lot of use cases of how people have managed to do interesting things in workflows, rather than so that's been my orientation, which is how do I build things, very small b build things, more than just how do I learn a new tool. And with every release, it enables you to do more things, and that feels very empowering and very positive if you're already playing with the tools. So that's what I'll keep doing, just build custom GPTs on the regular.
And then finally, any podcast you're listening to that you're hooked on right now?
Good question. I mean, on these topics, I do spend a lot of time listening to the AI podcasts, because I do think that they offer a really interesting context. What's it called? The AI breakdown is really good for that, and what's it called? There's an and like more or less. What is it? Yeah, more or less, which is there are a couple too. The Dave Morin one. They talk a lot about, in general, sort of the business side of the technology disruptions, which I think is like is the interesting part about like what's real and what's not in this space, and gives you a sense of maybe a better sense of where things are going to land than trying to keep up with all the individual products.
Sounds good. Ivan, thank you so much for joining me today and being a guinea pig in my experiment. So I really appreciate your candor, and more importantly, I think you had some tremendous great insight. So I'm really pleased that we had the chance to talk, and it was great. Thank you. So I'll stop recording in a second.